My life felt like a dream, a perfect, fragile bubble I was terrified to see burst. I was on the cusp of marrying Julian, the man I had envisioned for years as the father of my children, my steadfast life partner, and my ultimate sanctuary. Every detail had been meticulously planned and executed with love. The flowers, the carefully curated menu, the music that echoed our hearts, even the subtle nuances that only we understood. As I gazed at myself in the mirror, adorned in my pristine white gown, my mother wept tears of pure joy, convinced that I had finally discovered true happiness. Little did I know that this wedding, which was meant to be the ultimate celebration of our love, would instead mark the agonizing genesis of my greatest tragedy. From the outset, it was clear to me that I couldn't possibly walk down the aisle without my best friend, Laura Jenkins, by my side. She was so much more than just a friend. She was my soul sister, my trusted confidant, the one person who knew every hidden corner of my heart. That's why I chose her as my maid of honor without a moment's hesitation. No one questioned my decision. Everyone recognized the profound depth of our connection. She smiled with what seemed like genuine tenderness as she helped me adjust my veil and ensured every detail was perfect. Unbeknownst to me, behind those sweet, familiar eyes, a dark secret was lurking, a secret that would relentlessly unravel my life from the inside out. We desired an intimate wedding, far removed from the relentless hustle and bustle of the city. That's why we chose an elegant estate nestled in the rolling hills of Virginia, embraced by ancient trees and vibrant, blooming gardens. The place possessed an undeniable magic, boasting a stately stone manor, cozy, inviting rooms, and a grand hall with soaring ceilings and enormous windows that welcomed the warm, golden light of the setting sun. There, surrounded by our cherished families and closest friends, we dreamed of celebrating our love and embarking on a new, shared life together. Nothing seemed amiss. Everything felt perfectly harmonious. But that very place would soon bear witness to the most devastating collapse of my existence. We had reserved the entire estate for the weekend, allowing our parents and the wedding party to stay the night before and after the ceremony. We envisioned it as more than just an event. We wanted it to be a cherished moment of togetherness, filled with shared laughter and joyful anticipation. The night before the wedding, we all gathered for a delightful dinner on the patio, illuminated by twinkling string lights, serenaded by soft music, and with glasses of fine wine in our hands. Julian appeared calm, even affectionate, and Laura remained faithfully by my side, as she always had. No one suspected that beneath that tranquil facade, a storm was brewing. A storm poised to irrevocably alter our lives forever. That night, I went to bed with a heart brimming with hope, mentally replaying every precious moment of the day, utterly convinced that I had finally found true and lasting happiness. I drifted off to sleep late, feeling a mix of happy nerves, picturing the moment I would walk toward Julian in my beautiful white dress. The next morning, the first golden rays of sunlight streamed through the window, and I awoke with a surge of energy I hadn't felt since childhood. Laura was the first to enter my room, bringing me breakfast with a smile that I now recognize as a carefully crafted mask. I felt grateful, excited, and secure, completely unaware that everything I believed to be true was about to shatter. When the moment arrived, my father took my arm, and we began our walk toward the garden, where everyone was eagerly waiting. The gentle melody of string instruments, the delicate white petals scattered on the ground, the tearful eyes of our loved ones, everything seemed to be lifted from the pages of a fairy tale. Julian stood waiting for me at the end of the aisle, his eyes glistening with emotion and wearing the smile that had captivated me countless times. I walked toward him, struggling to hold back tears of joy, convinced that I was taking the most important and beautiful step of my life. No one could have foreseen that my "I do" would actually mark the beginning of my greatest heartbreak. When the officiant asked if we accepted to join our lives in marriage, I didn't hesitate for even a second. My voice was shaky but firm as I responded, "I do," my eyes brimming with love as I gazed at Julian. He also said, "I do," with a smile. Although for a fleeting moment, I thought his expression darkened ever so slightly right after he spoke the words. I simply attributed it to the nerves that we all inevitably feel when taking such a monumental step. We kissed to the sound of thunderous applause, surrounded by a sea of white flowers and heartfelt tears of emotion. In that instant, I truly believed it was all worth it, that our love was real and enduring. The celebration unfolded exactly as we had envisioned, intimate, elegant, and overflowing with joy. We dined beneath a canopy of stars, serenaded by soft music and surrounded by the warm glow of candles on every table. There were moments of genuine laughter, heartfelt anecdotes, and hugs that seemed undeniably sincere, as if we were all part of something truly eternal. Julian mingled with our guests and laughed, but I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something distant in the way he looked at me. I tried to dismiss it, attributing it to simple exhaustion from all the wedding planning, and resolved to simply savor every second. My father stood up, overcome with emotion, to toast our union, speaking of how incredibly proud he was of me and how he had watched our love blossom and grow. Everyone applauded, and Julian raised his glass with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes, as if he were forcing the emotion. I looked at him, searching for that familiar spark, but all I found was a strange emptiness in his gaze. I told myself that I was perhaps being overly sensitive, that I shouldn't go looking for problems where none existed. But deep down, something inside me was beginning to crack, even though I didn't fully realize it yet. After the party, we retreated to the bridal suite together, a warm and elegant space we had lovingly decorated with flowers and candles to create an unforgettable ambiance. My heart was pounding with a mix of excitement and nerves as I contemplated how special this night, our first as husband and wife, would be. I closed the door softly, wanting to prolong the intimate moment, believing that we were about to seal our love story in the most perfect way. Julian placed his watch on the nightstand, took off his shoes without even glancing at me, and sighed heavily. I moved to hug him, and that's when I heard it. "I'm tired," he said, not looking at me, his tone devoid of any warmth or inflection, as if I wasn't even there. I stood frozen, struggling to understand if it was a joke, if something had happened that I hadn't noticed. But his face was serious, distant, and completely devoid of any emotion or desire. He turned his back to me, unbuttoned his shirt, and went straight to the twin bed that was tucked away in a corner of the room. He didn't say goodnight, nor did he turn around. He simply turned off the light, plunging the room into a silence that felt more painful than any shouted argument. I sat on the edge of the marriage bed, completely unsure of what to do with my body or my thoughts, feeling utterly invisible on the most important night of my life. I waited for what felt like an eternity for a gesture, a word, an explanation, but all I received was the sound of his quiet, even breathing from the other side of the room. I slowly lay down on the bed, unable to hold back the tears that streamed down my face, desperately trying to stifle any sound so as not to appear pathetic. The room was filled with the sweet fragrance of fresh flowers, but inside my chest, everything felt as though it was withering and dying. And that's how I spent my first night as a wife, alone, confused, and with a soul that felt utterly shattered. I don't know how long I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wishing it was all just a horrible nightmare, that Julian would come over and embrace me in a surprise hug. But the hours slowly ticked by, the silence remained absolute, and his body remained still in the twin bed, as far away from me as if we were complete strangers. At some point, sheer exhaustion finally took over, and I closed my eyes. But I couldn't have been asleep for more than 30 minutes when a muffled sound jolted me awake. I sat up, my heart pounding in my chest, disoriented and trying to determine where the sound was coming from. I turned my head, and Julian's bed was empty. I slowly got out of bed, my bare feet touching the cold floor, feeling an inexplicable knot tightening in my stomach. I walked to the door, opened it carefully, and heard the sound again. It was a short, stifled groan, as if someone was desperately trying not to make any noise. The hallway was dark, illuminated only by the faint light emanating from a room at the end. I stood there for a few agonizing seconds, trying to convince myself that it was perhaps a movie, a voice on the television, anything logical. But something deep inside me already knew that I was about to hear something I shouldn't. I forced myself to move forward, still making sure to remain silent. And that's when it struck me that the room belonged to my mother-in-law, Julian's mother. She had mentioned at the end of dinner that she wasn't feeling well and had to go into town to get some medicine. She hadn't returned since, and no one seemed to have been concerned about her absence. My mind began to piece together the impossible, but my heart stubbornly refused to believe it. What was Julian doing in there in the middle of the night, in his mother's room, which was supposed to be empty? I took one more hesitant step. The groans persisted. I moved down the hallway with a pounding heart and a cold sweat trickling down my back, desperately trying to silence every footstep so as not to alert whoever was inside. It wasn't just the noise that was bothering me anymore, but the fact that Julian wasn't in our room on our wedding night, and at that very moment, in that part of the house, something deep inside me started connecting the scattered pieces. Details I had previously dismissed, glances that hadn't seemed significant before. I didn't want to think about it. I didn't want to imagine it. But my feet already knew where they were leading me, and my soul had a terrible premonition. It was about to shatter. I stopped right in front of the door that belonged to my mother-in-law, the same one that was supposed to be empty that night, and I felt my hands trembling uncontrollably. From inside, the groans continued, now softer, as if someone was holding their breath, as if they knew someone was listening. I swallowed hard and pressed my ear against the wood, holding my breath for a moment to hear more clearly. A soft creak of the bed, a stifled sigh, and then a woman's voice. I squeezed my eyes shut, desperately wishing I was wrong, but I recognized it instantly. It was Laura. There was no doubt in my mind. Her voice was unmistakable, broken whispers, a blend of pleasure and urgency, intertwined with the little laughs I had heard so many times in confidence. I felt a sharp blow to my chest, as if someone had punched me to the ground without warning. I leaned against the wall, dazed, unsure whether to scream, run, or simply pass out right there. Everything we had shared, all our secrets, the long teenage talks, the promises of unwavering loyalty, all came crashing down with that sound. And the worst was yet to come. And then I heard his voice. Julian's deep, unmistakable voice, whispering Laura's name between low gasps that left no room for doubt. I felt the ground vanish from beneath my feet, the air grow thick, and I struggled to catch my breath. It was the voice of my husband, the man who just hours ago had promised me eternal love in front of everyone. And now he was there, in the middle of the night, sharing the bed he had refused to share with me, with my best friend. The tears came without my being able to stop them, but I didn't make a single sound. I rested my forehead against the wall, shaking uncontrollably, feeling smaller than I ever had in my life. I found it difficult to comprehend how this could be happening on my wedding night, in the house where I believed everything was just beginning. Every word, every groan, was like a dagger piercing straight through my soul, and still, I didn't move. I decided to stay there, rooted to the spot in front of the door, without making a sound, waiting for them to emerge so I could confront them. I needed to see their faces, hear their excuses, and confirm with my own eyes what I had already heard. Time became eternal. Every minute felt like torture, and my heart pounded against my chest with a wild, desperate force. I closed my eyes, opened them, and I was still there. I didn't leave. The door suddenly opened, and Julian emerged, his shirt unbuttoned and his belt askew, running his hands through his hair as if he didn't expect to encounter anyone. When he saw me standing in front of him, he froze for a second, his eyes wide with shock and guilt etched across his face. He didn't utter a word. He simply turned around, as if searching for an explanation for his own betrayal. And then she appeared. Laura came out behind him, her hair disheveled, her makeup smeared, and her dress wrinkled, clutching her heels in her hand. When she saw me, she froze, rooted to the spot, as if she had seen a ghost, unable to feign surprise or even meet my gaze. I didn't need any more proof. The image of the two of them together, standing in silence with guilt radiating from their bodies, spoke louder than any words could. And still, I dared to ask why. I stood in front of them without moving an inch, blocking their path, my body tense and my voice trembling with a mixture of anger and pain. I demanded to know how they could have done it, how they had the cold-bloodedness to betray me on my wedding night. Julian didn't know where to look. Laura didn't even attempt to appear surprised. Silence was their initial response, as if they expected me to simply walk away without saying a word. But I didn't move. I didn't stay silent. I didn't give them that easy way out. Then, Julian raised his voice nervously and claimed that I was mistaken, that nothing had happened, that he had simply been helping Laura gather some belongings that his mother had left in the room. His lie was so clumsy, so utterly absurd, that for a moment it hurt even more than the betrayal itself. Laura remained silent. She simply looked down while he continued to fabricate excuses, each one more flimsy than the last. He looked at me as if I was the one losing control, but there was no more room for his charade. I told him that I had heard everything. Every whisper, every groan, every word they should never have shared between them. I told him that he didn't need to say anything else, that his silence had already revealed everything. Then Julian's shoulders slumped. He closed his eyes and finally admitted it in a low voice, as if he no longer possessed the strength to maintain the deception. He didn't offer an apology. He didn't explain why he had done it. He simply stated that he had been confused for a while, as if that somehow justified his betrayal. Laura burst into tears as soon as she heard his confession. She covered her face with her hands and began to repeat over and over that she was sorry, that she hadn't intended to hurt me, that she didn't know how things had escalated to that point. Her tears didn't move me. It was too late for tears, too late for regrets. For years, she had been the person I trusted most, and she had stabbed me in the back without a moment's hesitation. She was no longer my friend. She wasn't even a stranger. She was a threat. And in front of me, there was only an empty shell of a woman. I felt something inside me shatter into a million pieces, something that had no distinct shape or name, but that held everything I was. My legs trembled uncontrollably, my chest burned, and I could barely breathe, as if the very air was betraying me, just as they had. I didn't cry anymore. There were no tears left, only a mute, dry rage that consumed me from within. My wedding had transformed into a horrific nightmare, and I was no longer the same person. I didn't say anything else. I went to the room, gathered my belongings without looking at anyone, and descended the stairs, still wearing my gown, my face burning with shame, and my soul in pieces. No one followed me. I walked across the garden barefoot, ignoring the cold of the early morning and the fog that was beginning to blanket the ground. I just wanted to escape, to disappear, to breathe air that didn't reek of lies. And so I left without a goodbye, without an explanation, with a broken heart and my dignity intact. I walked for hours without any destination in mind, down empty roads, my dress dragging in the dirt, and my makeup a sad shadow beneath my eyes. No one passed by, no one inquired, and in a way, I was grateful that the world continued to turn, oblivious to my personal tragedy. I sat on a bench next to a barren field, shivering from the cold, replaying the events I had heard and witnessed over and over again in my mind. I couldn't understand when everything had gone so terribly wrong. It was my wedding night, and I was alone, broken, and utterly lost. As the sky began to lighten, I retraced my steps, guided more by exhaustion than by any conscious decision. The estate was still quiet, sleeping beneath the faint light of dawn, as if nothing had transpired. I entered through the back door without making a sound, feeling like an intruder in a place that just hours before had been the setting for my greatest happiness. I didn't know what I was going to do, but something deep inside me needed to find closure. I couldn't leave without revealing the truth. The dining room was filled with soft voices, plates of fruit, coffee mugs, and the smiles of strangers, as if everything was proceeding as normal. My parents, my in-laws, the wedding party, everyone was chatting, completely unaware of what had transpired in the darkness. No one inquired about me. No one seemed to have noticed my absence. I quietly wiped my face, walked into the room, and requested their attention. With a firm voice, calmer than I felt inside, I asked everyone to gather in the main living room. I didn't want any drama or to beat around the bush. I had something to say, and I wasn't going to delay any longer. My father looked at me with a worried expression. My mother stood up immediately, and one by one, everyone entered the room, confused and expectant. I didn't see Julian or Laura among them, and that in itself spoke volumes. As everyone took their seats, my eyes scanned the room, searching for them, hoping deep down for one last cowardly appearance. But neither Julian nor Laura was present. They hadn't dared to show their faces, and their absence confirmed everything without the need for a single word more. My parents immediately sensed that something was wrong and looked at me with unease, as if they already knew that what I was about to say wasn't going to be pleasant. And then, without any hesitation, I spoke. I thanked them for being with me on what should have been the happiest day of my life. And then, without any hesitation, I told them the truth. I revealed that I had discovered Julian and Laura together in his mother's room on my wedding night, betraying me without any shame or remorse. I heard murmurs ripple through the room, saw furrowed brows and tense faces, and felt their disbelief. But my voice didn't waver because, for the first time in hours, I felt like I was regaining control. Silence enveloped the room like a powerful wave that washes away everything in its path, and no one knew how to react at first. My mother covered her mouth in shock. My in-laws looked down as if they couldn't bear the weight of the shame. Some people stood up. Others looked at me as if they couldn't believe what they were hearing. No one claimed that it wasn't true. No one attempted to defend them because deep down, everyone knew that I was not capable of fabricating something like this. With a clear and unwavering voice, I announced that I intended to annul the marriage, that I wanted nothing to do with Julian or Laura ever again, and that I hoped no one would attempt to convince me otherwise. I didn't want pity or sympathy, only respect for my decision. My father stood up and enveloped me in a silent, firm hug, as if to convey that he was proud of me. No one applauded. No one protested. They simply let me go. As I left the room, I heard my mother-in-law quietly sobbing and her husband attempting to comfort her without success. My own parents had reddened eyes, not from sadness, but from helplessness, from the anger of not having been able to protect me. I felt like I was leaving behind not just a wedding, but an entire version of myself that no longer existed. Disappointment hung heavy in the air, like a bitter perfume that everyone was inhaling, and in the midst of all that, I departed without looking back. I left the estate without a backward glance, taking nothing with me but my dignity. The same dignity that, despite the excruciating pain, was still intact. The white dress was stained with dirt, tears, and a story that no longer belonged to me. I walked toward the road with my head held high, like someone who survives a devastating storm without losing themselves. I didn't answer calls, messages, or questions. That part of my life was dead to me. When I arrived home, with my soul still raw and aching, I contacted a lawyer and filed for divorce without delay. I didn't want days of reflection, family advice, or second chances. I wanted to close that chapter with the same decisiveness with which I had lived it. I handed over the documents and refused to see Julian again, not to talk, not to sign anything. I was not the same woman who had said, "I do," at that altar. Weeks later, I was informed that Julian had moved in with Laura, as if their betrayal had been part of some grand, romantic plan. They went about their lives together as if nothing had happened, as if the pain they had inflicted on me simply didn't exist. He seemed to believe that he had found true love, the kind that justifies the unjustifiable. But life, sooner or later, always returns what you sow, and their supposed love didn't take long to rot. A few months later, rumors began to circulate about their constant arguments, yells that the neighbors could clearly hear through the walls. Laura no longer smiled with the same confidence as before, and Julian spent hours outside the house, seemingly avoiding her. What had begun as a forbidden passion had quickly devolved into a routine of distrust and blame. She had destroyed a friendship for a man who didn't know how to truly love anyone, and he was already growing bored again. Then one day, completely out of the blue, Julian disappeared from the apartment he shared with Laura, leaving her with nothing but a note and a fabricated truth. He had been unfaithful, seeking solace in the arms of a younger woman, someone oblivious to the history they shared. He simply repeated a pattern, because what he felt was never love, but a fleeting fancy fueled by ego. Laura was left utterly alone, devastated, stripped of a partner, friends, and even her own credibility. It was then, in her isolation, that she finally grasped the depth of what she had done to me. Laura, without Julian, and without a single soul to lean on, slowly watched as the little she had left crumbled away. Her former friends deserted her. My family severed all ties, and her world collapsed like a poorly built sandcastle. She desperately sought support, but found she had no one left to call. A betrayal of that magnitude is rarely forgotten, and she finally experienced the crushing weight of utter loneliness. I on the other hand, resolved to immerse myself in my work, to rebuild my life from the ground up, without succumbing to the temptation of revenge or dwelling on explanations. I opened my eyes to new possibilities, surrounded myself with positive influences, and learned to make decisions from a place of calm and reason. I invested in myself, in my business ventures, in my innovative ideas, and gradually the overwhelming sadness began to dissipate, replaced by a sense of clarity. I discovered the profound truth that I could find happiness within myself, independent of anyone else, and for the first time, a feeling of genuine self-pride began to blossom within me. I expanded my business, opening a second store, followed by a third, and within a year, my name started to resonate throughout the industry, earning respect and admiration. Customers, suppliers, and prominent trade publications all wanted to know the story of the woman who had built a small empire from absolutely nothing. But I wasn't driven by the pursuit of recognition. My sole focus was on establishing stability and independence. The independence I had always longed for was now being built with my own two hands, and I was determined that no one could ever take that away from me. 3 years passed. My life had undergone a profound transformation. It was now serene, grounded, and free from turmoil and lingering wounds. The memory of that night no longer brought pain. On the contrary, it served as a powerful reminder of how far I had come since then. I had left Julian, Laura, and everything they represented far behind me. I had learned to embrace solitude without feeling empty or incomplete. And just when I least expected it, something extraordinary happened. It was at a business meeting, during a presentation among fellow entrepreneurs, that I met him. His name was Daniel Jackson, and he spoke with a quiet confidence that was not intimidating, but rather utterly captivating. He didn't try to impress me with boastful claims or attempt to sell himself. He simply listened intently to what I had to say and asked me questions that no one had ever thought to ask before. I didn't feel the rush of infatuation, but something deeper, a sense of profound peace. And in that moment, I knew that something significant was about to begin. With Daniel, everything felt different from the very beginning. There was no sense of urgency, no shallow promises, only genuine conversations, mutual respect, and even the silences felt comfortable and natural. He didn't pressure me or try to fill any void in my life. He walked alongside me effortlessly, allowing me to set the pace. Gradually, I began to look forward to his messages, to hearing the sound of his voice, to missing the way he looked at me. It wasn't a fleeting passion, but something much more profound. It was a deep sense of peace unlike anything I had ever experienced before. At first, I struggled to trust my own happiness, as if I were constantly anticipating something to go wrong. But Daniel seemed to understand this without me having to explain it. He was patient, steadfast, and unwavering. With every gesture, he showed me that love could exist without destruction, without lies, without using another person as a means of survival. I learned to trust again, not because he demanded it, but because his actions and his very being fostered an environment where trust could naturally flourish. And with that, I finally healed the wounds that Julian had inflicted. When we officially started dating, everything flowed with ease and grace, without the need for pretense or justification. The people around me noticed the change in me. I was no longer the woman who merely survived. I had become the woman who truly lived. With Daniel, I shared travels, collaborative projects, and simple, everyday moments that became unforgettable. He didn't promise me a distant future. He offered me a solid and unwavering present. And after everything I had endured, that meant more than words could express. I don't know how, but Julian found out that I was seeing someone, and soon after, he sent me a message dripping with what was supposed to be nostalgia. He claimed to be happy that I was doing well, that he occasionally reflected on what we had lost, and that he wished me all the best. But beneath the surface, I could detect the bitterness of someone who couldn't bear to see the person they thought they had destroyed thriving and finding happiness. I didn't respond. I owed nothing to the man who had taken everything from me and yet failed to break me completely. One afternoon, without any warning, Julian appeared at the door of my store. He looked gaunt. His eyes lacked their former spark, and his clothes seemed to hang on him as if life itself was a heavy burden. He asked for just 5 minutes of my time. He claimed that he needed closure, that he hadn't stopped thinking about me. I looked at him calmly, devoid of anger or sadness. The past no longer had the power to wound me. He no longer held any significance in my life. I asked him to speak quickly, explaining that I didn't have time to dwell on the past. He began to ramble about how he had made a mistake, how he had been a coward, how he had lost me because he hadn't known how to appreciate what he had. I listened, without interrupting, my face betraying no emotion, like someone observing the rain from behind a closed window. When he finally finished, I looked at him firmly and stated that he no longer had any power over me, that our shared history was over, and that he shouldn't believe he could ever reclaim what he himself had destroyed. I made it unequivocally clear that I never wanted to see him again, that there was no place for him in my present or my future. There were no insults or raised voices, just a resolute, cold, and final rejection. Julian attempted a weak smile, as if he still believed he could sway me, but he was no longer the man who once made me tremble. Now, he just seemed small, insignificant, and utterly irrelevant. I asked him to leave, and this time, I was the one who closed the door. Before he left, his eyes were filled with suppressed frustration, as if he couldn't stand the sight of me being happy without him. He mumbled something about how quickly I had moved on, as if he wanted to inflict some kind of pain. But I didn't react. What would have devastated me before now simply rolled off me like water off a duck's back. He left without saying goodbye, his shoulders slumped in defeat, knowing that he had lost me forever, because there was no possibility of going back. When silence returned, I sat at my desk and took a deep, cleansing breath, as if I could finally live my own life without being haunted by the shadows of the past. I didn't feel elation or triumph, just a profound sense of calm, the kind that comes when you know you have successfully closed the most challenging chapter of your life without compromising your integrity. I was no longer a victim, a survivor, or anyone's ex. I was simply me, whole, peaceful, and at peace with myself. Daniel came in a few minutes later, unaware of what had just transpired. But when he saw me, he wrapped his arms around me in a silent embrace. He didn't need an explanation. He simply offered his presence, his unwavering support, and his unconditional love. I looked at him and knew that life, with all its twists and turns and its share of painful wounds, had brought me to him for a reason. By his side, I didn't feel lost or unsteady. I felt at home, and I finally understood what true love truly meant. I realized that nothing in life is guaranteed, that even the most seemingly unbreakable love can shatter without warning, and that loyalty doesn't always come from those closest to you. But I also discovered that pain is not the end of everything, but rather the beginning of something we cannot yet even imagine. The ruins of what I once was provided the perfect foundation for rebuilding myself, making me stronger and more independent than ever before. I learned that anyone who survives such a profound betrayal not only recovers but is reborn into a stronger version of themselves. And I had indeed been reborn. Today, I look back without anger or resentment, because the past no longer holds any power over me. I'm still with Daniel. My business continues to flourish, and my life is peaceful, vibrant, and full of joy. I no longer seek external validation. I don't feel the need to prove anything to anyone. My only goal is to remain true to my feelings and to be authentic to who I am. This is not a story of revenge, but a testament to the power of dignity. Because my happy ending didn't come from another person, it came from within myself. I never ran into Julian or Laura again. And I didn't need to. Not because I had forgiven them, but because they no longer occupied any space in my thoughts or in my heart. Sometimes people ask me if I would ever trust someone again after what I went through, and my answer is always the same. Not only did I trust again, but I learned to choose better. Daniel didn't come to rescue me. He found me whole and chose me that way. I know that my story isn't unique. There are countless women who have experienced betrayal, humiliation, or abandonment, often just when they believed they had found happiness. But if I could leave them with one lasting thought, it would be this. Don't allow yourself to be broken by someone who doesn't know how to love. Don't stay in a situation where you are not treated with respect. The strongest love is the love you have for yourself. Everything else, when it comes, should simply be a complement to that love, never its central focus. Today, I'm writing this from the terrace of my home, sipping a cup of tea while Daniel reads a book beside me as the sun begins to set. Peace doesn't sound like the explosion of fireworks. It sounds like shared silence, mutual respect, and the comforting knowledge that nothing is missing. If you've ever doubted whether true love is possible for you, let me assure you that it doesn't arrive when you expect it. It arrives when you finally choose yourself. Sometimes, when I walk alone through the streets of my neighborhood, I pause in front of a storefront and gaze at my reflection. I no longer seek validation in my own eyes or search for the idealized love I dreamed of as a child. I only seek to recognize myself, and there I am, with my scars, yes, but also with a strength that I once mistook for weakness. I've learned that pain can break you, but it can also rebuild you, making you more aware and more authentically you. I keep a box filled with mementos from that day that changed everything. Not to torture myself with painful memories, but to never forget how far I've come since then. Every dried flower, every photograph, every detail of that dress serves as a testament to a version of myself that died that night and paved the way for the woman I am today. I don't throw that box away. I embrace it and respect it, because without it, I wouldn't be where I am today. Daniel sometimes looks at me with a hint of wonder, as if he can't comprehend how someone who has been so deeply wounded can love with such tranquility, and I smile at him. Not because the past doesn't hurt, but because it no longer controls me. When love is genuine, it doesn't demand unreasonable sacrifices or ask you to diminish yourself. True love begins when you decide not to beg for affection, when you understand that whoever chooses you must choose you freely and wholeheartedly. And so my story concludes not with a passionate kiss in the rain or a fairy tale wedding, but with a cup of tea, a hand to hold, and a peaceful heart. Because I've come to understand that the true happy ending isn't about finding the perfect man, but about becoming the woman who no longer needs to be rescued from anything, who is free to live in peace, in truth, and in love. Did you like my story? And which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If you like the story, you can support me by sending a super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories like this. Thank you so much for your sweet support. I'm looking forward to your comments on the story. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's so much more on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story, with love and respect.